Good morning, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we're at property address 11604 Southwest 35th Avenue here in Portland. I describe everything as if you're standing in the street facing the front of the house. We are just to the right of the front doorway. Big 4-inch ABS cleanout sticking out of the ground. Should you lose track of it for some reason, which I think will be hard, it sits right, almost directly in front of the first foundation vent here to the right of the door. So we're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water is running, and this is an actively lived-in care home, so I'm not going to run my own water. I'm just going to kind of depend on the water that's going through here. Honestly, I'm going to have a harder time getting the water off in here than on. So I'm going to try not to add any more to it than necessary. Anyway, I zeroed the foot counter out there at the base of the cleanout. Off we go. Yeah, right out of the gate, actually a very clean flow line. There's a little bit of grease buildup on the sidewalls, but as clean as this flow line is, that almost feels like that may have been related to a household that lived here prior to the current one. Because generally when you get stuff on the sidewalls like that, you'll also have it in the flow line, unless the line has gone quite a while without any grease going down it. That's kind of how that's feeling and looking. It's a very grease buildup. I've been doing this 13 years now. I've cambered almost 25,000 sewer lines, done my fair share of drain cleaning and repairs, and grease buildup has become something that I have become far more concerned about than a lot of structural issues, like bellies, offset joints, things like that. Not that those can't cause problems when they're significant enough, but it's often, what I've found over the years is it's often a structural issue coupled with thick grease buildup that makes the line constricted and sticky, and then someone finishes the job by flushing a monster or a couple giant balls of toilet paper down the line and or improper items like wipes. It's often a conjunction of things like that that result in a blockage. It's a very good maintenance item to keep up with. It makes your line a lot more forgiving when improper things do go down the line. And so far here, fantastic looking sewer line. Of course, I say that right as we go running into some standing water. The good thing is, though, as long as we don't have a root or something at the other end of this thing, and of course, man, I'm just calling it today, aren't I? Transitioning here to concrete pipe. So what I was going to say there is when you start getting into a belly like that, and that is not a terribly significant belly, at the distances of 90 plus feet out, a belly like that has almost no chance of causing a problem unless the homeowner is hugely helping it along. And by that I mean flushing a lot of improper junk down the line. The root intrusion, however, is a little bit different animal. That's something that has the potential to be a hard obstruction and can snag debris. Again, in this circumstance, it is something I always recommend repairs on because roots are unpredictable. They can grow, block the sewer line up. A little bit different than standing water. Standing water is malleable, it moves around, where roots do not once they're large enough and get too grown in front of the flow line. Anyway, the plus side in this circumstance is if for some reason the roots are not repaired, they are at least in a better spot, being that they're a good distance from the home, but still something that could potentially pose a potential for blockages. So I am going to try and locate that as best I can here. And I'm going to go locate, in fact, I'm going to pull back a little bit. I try to move a little faster on these just in the event someone starts running a bathtub or something. I want to try and take a look at this thing with as little water in it as possible. So what I would look into on this one, and it may require, it looks like there's some secondary cleanouts. I would look into the prospect of an epoxy liner, which is a trenchless repair system. Right now the roots are not affecting functionality. The line is functioning as if they are not there. But it's also very possible that these roots are being maintained or cut from time to time, and we may be getting a minimized look at them from their normal natural state. So, first and foremost, I recommend they be fixed. If not fixed, right now they're not at a point where they really need root cutting, but it's something I would be rescoping it at about 1 year to take a look at them to see if they're growing aggressively. It'll give you at least a baseline for how frequently you might need to be doing root cutting on the line to maintain things. You can also slow the growth down, in most cases anyway, by using root killing foam, stuff like that. But ideally, they get repaired so you don't have to be dealing with that. But if you do end up doing a repair on this, especially if you go the liner, the epoxy liner route, which generally speaking is trenchless, the repair guys have to kind of assess that to see if another access point needs to be put in due to how far they are from the home. But generally, what you want to do here is not just simply line the transition joint. It would make no sense to do that. I would line all of the concrete to ensure that you seal this joint off and any other joints in front of it that could potentially get roots into them in the future. Alright, I've marked this as best I can. I cannot get a great locate here. It's a very awkward spot. And I'll draw a diagram, which will probably be the easiest way to figure things out as to where this is located. So I did put a green paint marking down. It's probably going to be a little tricky to find, as it's in the kind of the wooded area about 10 feet before the street. So as the line, again, this is as you're facing the front of the home from kind of the driveway area. The line comes away from the front of the house. It makes a left-hand turn, and it parallels the front of the house, essentially. This is kind of describing where the line is at anyway. Parallels the front of the house, moving from right to left toward Southwest 35th. The line's going into the road a good probably 30 feet or so to the left, 20, 30 feet to the left of where the mailboxes are. And it's right where the ground rises up towards the roadway. We're kind of at the base of that. Considering the terrain here, how this house is situated and laid out, this was a expertly installed line. Usually when you have this kind of setup here, I expect to see a lot more standing water issues. I imagine at some point in time this line had more roots in it, but it's hard to say. I don't know the age of this home, but this is something that's older that used to have all concrete pipe. Likely that was probably what got it updated. It might be newer than I think, though. I just think that because a lot of homes in this neighborhood are older. Anyhow, I do recommend that be repaired. First and foremost, I would look into an epoxy liner for the repair. I think it's going to be potentially easier to do. What I like about the liners, too, is they're for the most part, a jointless pipe product. You don't have as many weak points in them for roots to get through. And those transition joints, anytime you have a material transition, ABS to concrete, ABS to PVC, what have you, they are by far the weakest joints in a sewer line to root intrusions. They're harder to seal up. There's always a difference in pipe diameter, so you get a little bit of a ledge on the outside of the pipe. It's just an anchoring point. So what you want to do if you go the liner route is overlap that joint. You want to start the liner before the transition so you get a good overlap over it. And I would take that update all the way to the end to the main lateral. Assuming that the roadway there is not maintained for Multnomah County anyway. Most of Multnomah County, the city takes responsibility at the street edge. But that's to help bolster the lineup. It's older concrete pipe, and concrete is probably the weakest pipe out there to root intrusions. So as time goes on, it's just going to become more and more likely roots find their way into that section of pipe. And when it comes to epoxy lining, anyway, it behooves you to go the distance. You're going to have the same setup fee that you have whether you line 2 feet or 200 feet. So it's really not a huge added cost to run that to the end of the line there. It's about a 10, 12-foot section. That's what I would suggest. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and flip the camera around here and run backwards. As it sits currently, we have good flow of the main lateral. The belly that's out there, I mean, especially when you consider the distance it is from the home, is rinky-dink. It's something I'd barely even consider repairs on, even if it were close to the home. At the distance it is from this house, you would have to abuse this thing like no tomorrow in order to get a blockage out of a belly like that. You are getting some decent grease buildup ridges going back into the home here, so at the very least, I would recommend a thorough mainline jetting on this. Right now, you wouldn't be doing a whole lot to clear the roots out as they almost look like they've been cut back. They're fairly short right now. But I would run that machine backwards and forwards to ensure you get any thick grease buildup out of the interior of the line. That right now poses the higher risk for blocking than the roots do, and or the belly by a long shot. That may change if the roots have a chance to grow and whatnot, but if you do end up doing repairs and or drain cleaning for that matter, I do recommend rescoping the line to check the work, make sure it was all done properly. If for some reason you do a dig style repair, traditional type excavation, Make sure when you do a rescope on it, you do it when the trench is closed. You don't want to do it when the ground is open. Everything is in theory at that point up until you put weight on top of the line. That's how bellies happen, and where a lot of them get missed. They get a rescope when the trench is open, when everything looks perfect. It's not until you put a bunch of 6-7 feet of earth on top of it that you get to see that stuff. So make sure that's how that happens when you do a rescope. Sorry, bear with me a second. Drop some notes down here. Anyhow, as the line currently sits, even with the grease buildup in here, the line is functioning. It is draining slower than it should due to that grease buildup. It just restricts solids as it comes through the line, but it's still a functioning sewer line. You will have improved flow and functionality and have helped mitigate the blockage risk if you get the grease buildup out. And that can be mitigated entirely just by living habits, not getting grease buildup in the line. And again, first and foremost, recommend the repairs there on the roots. If they're not corrected, I would rescope the line at the 1-year mark. That's going to give you an idea as to how aggressively the roots are growing and how frequently you're going to want to be doing maintenance root cutting. And this would be a good idea, especially if it remains a foster home that has a lot of high volume going down the line, to rescope periodically. The line goes through quite a bit of foliage as it makes its way out to the street. So roots are a real possibility on a line like this, whether the line is brand new or not. These are big trees out here, and they are powerful. So this will kind of give you an idea as to where we're going, but I will put a diagram on the report. So there's the front door, there's the clean out. The line comes out, essentially shoots under the driveway, paralleling the front of the house off into the wooded area that direction. It does not go up this driveway. It goes off straight that way. In fact, if you were to draw a straight line going off that front left corner of the house toward the road, that's a very, very good, or that at least will give you a pretty good idea as to where the line's headed. And then right where the ground kind of dips down as you go towards the road, and then it rises back up. Right as the ground starts to rise back up towards the road, that's about where you're going to see my green paint marking, and that's a paint marking to be considered rough. It's a very tricky spot to locate on that weird incline, especially with all the foliage there. That's just kind of giving you a rough idea as to where things are at. It is something that would need to be relocated if repairs were getting done a traditional way. Everything else we've scoped here, aside from the root intruded area, including the bellied area, all of it is intact, in good condition, and has good flow. Concrete pipe is obviously older. It's in fair condition aside from where the root intruded area is, but this is a good time if you're going to do a liner or any type of repair. I don't recommend cutting it short. I recommend going the full meal deal, because what you're going to end up with if you do it in parts and pieces, you're going to have another transition joint to concrete. And you're very likely to end up with a root intrusion going through it in the very near future if you go that way. So if you're going to do a repair on it, take it the full distance so you help to mitigate the risk of that happening.